Welcome to Television Sydney News. I'm Christina Pollard. It's great to have you with us. In this week's bulletin, victims of the Bali bombings remembered, snow falls in the Blue Mountains, and gamers get their hands on all the latest releases. But first, operators of an Islamic primary school planned for Cecil Park have moved to quadruple student numbers. Ilim College of Australia's original application, which provided for 75 students at the Elizabeth Drive site, was approved by the New South Wales Land and Environment Court last year, overruling Fairfield Council and angering local residents. Now the college has applied to increase the number to 360 students. School spokesman Abe Kajuku has been unavailable for comment, but President of the Hoxton Park Residents Action Group, Marella Harris, says the issue should be of concern to residents across Sydney.
The DAs are being marched through and the residents' wishes and knowledge is being ignored totally. It's just inappropriate altogether. These things should not be being done the way that they are. They're abusing our legal system. They're marching over our rights.
She says an increase in students will affect traffic, parking and noise and will pose a safety risk if traffic lights aren't installed nearby. Ms Harris says the applicants have been misleading over the issue.
They've deceived the council, they've deceived the residents, they have deceived the Australian public on this, and they will continue to deceive. How much more has to be done and be spent? We're looking at a $15 or $20 million complex here, not a $680,000 one. And it won't stop at 78 or 150 or 300 students, it will go to 1,000 students.
Residents have obtained more than 2,000 signatures on petitions against the development. Sutherland Shire residents have commemorated the 10th anniversary of the Bali bombings. 7 of the 88 Australian victims of the terrorist attack were from Sydney's southern beaches. A service to remember the victims was held at the Seed Sandstone Memorial in Cronulla at 4 p.m. on Friday. For those locals left behind, there have been glimmers of hope since the tragedy, with marriages, relocations, new careers and the births of children and grandchildren. For Pauline Whitten, it was the births of 2 precious granddaughters that helped her cope with the pain of losing her beloved daughter Charmaine in the terrorist attacks. Mrs Whitten flew to Bali in the days after the bombings in a desperate search for Charmaine and her best friend Jodie Wallace. Only a week after the West sweated through temperatures in excess of 30 degrees, unseasonal conditions saw snow falling in parts of the Blue Mountains on Friday. The Bureau of Meteorology issued a severe weather warning for Sydney and parts of the New South Wales coast as a deep low pressure system moved north. Snow was falling from Wentworth Falls to Mount Victoria in the mountains, while other parts of the Greater West shivered through wet, cold and windy conditions. Warnings were issued to motorists as the icy weather made road conditions hazardous. The M4 was closed for nearly 2 hours on Thursday after 2 semi-trailers and 3 cars were involved in a smash at Auburn. Witnesses say they heard up to 10 loud bangs when the semi-trailers driving away from Sydney near the Silverwater exit collided with the motorway's cement barrier about 12:20 p.m. A ute travelling in the same direction flipped over and caught fire, and witnesses say they saw more than 10 men attempting to rescue the screaming driver. One of the semi-trailers smashed through the central barrier and collided with a station wagon travelling in the opposite direction. Initial reports indicated 1 man suffered head injuries and another person was trapped in a car. Blue Mountains Police have renewed an appeal for information about the disappearance of a teenager believed to have been murdered 14 years ago. A coronial inquest began at Katoomba Local Court on Monday over the disappearance of 19-year-old Belinda Peasley, who went missing from her Trow Street home in September 1998. Police say Belinda had been associating with people involved in drug-related activity before she went missing and had debts despite receiving a considerable inheritance. Belinda's father, Mark Wern, says the family believes she has been murdered and that her 2 sons, now aged 15 and 17, want to know what happened to her.
I've lost a daughter. My grandson's lost a mother. Sharon and Rock behind me have lost a niece. It's the hard part. The worst of all is just the not knowing.
The state government has posted a reward of up to $100,000 for information leading to a conviction relating to Belinda's disappearance. Residents are furious and authorities are pointing the finger at each other following a planning bungle allowing 6-storey structures to be built at Ramsgate Beach. Rockdale Council endorsed a 16-metre height limit for the area in its local environment plan last December. but the Planning Department has admitted to introducing errors into the document, increasing height limits up to 20 metres in 8 locations, including Ramsgate's small village area. The errors weren't discovered until Helm Proprietary Limited lodged a $21 million plan for a 20-metre, 6-storey building at Ramsgate Beach in May. The application will be assessed by the Joint Regional Planning Panel on October 17. Blacktown Mount Druitt Hospital celebrated its 30th anniversary this week with the news that work on its $324 million redevelopment has started. The revamped Mount Druitt campus will include extra emergency department capacity, a new urgent care centre, extra chairs in an expanded dental facility and more rehabilitation services. The project is due for completion in 2016. An ambitious $210 million project to relocate defence warehouses in Moorebank is now underway. Some 45 warehouses storing army equipment will be relocated from a leased site onto Commonwealth land. The works are part of a national program to save taxpayers more than $74 million a year in operational costs. The Moorebank works, the largest relocation move in the country, are expected to generate more than 1,800 jobs, with 70% targeted for local industry. Former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has visited the Blue Mountains to leave his mark in local history. Mr Rudd continued a local tradition on Monday by planting a tree in the historic corridor of oaks at Falconbridge, which commemorates his time as Prime Minister. Mr Rudd was popular with the 150-strong crowd who turned out for the official welcome by Blue Mountains Mayor Daniel Miles and Labor Senator Doug Cameron. Mr Rudd delivered a speech before donning a gardening glove and, with Councillor Miles' help, planted his tree in the designated plot. Mr Rudd, who served as Prime Minister from 2007 before being replaced by Julia Gillard in 2010, said the occasion provided the opportunity to reflect on the challenges of leadership.
Leadership's a difficult thing. Anyone who says it's not is not being frank. One of the difficult things about leadership is uniting a nation rather than dividing it. The easiest thing to do in national political life is to divide us, to divide our country, to divide our people.
Prime Ministers or their relatives have planted a tree in the park since 1934 as a memorial to the father of Federation, Sir Henry Parkes, who's buried nearby. Frustrated motorists on Narellan Road were smiling this week after a 40km/h school zone speed limit was removed. Camden MP Chris Patterson was on hand as Roads and Maritime Services removed the signs from outside Mount Annan Christian College. Mr Patterson said the removal of the school zone was not a solution to the congestion on Narellan Road, but would help reduce travel times. The last time Aird's resident Anne Parsons received a bronze medal was at a swimming carnival when she was a child. But last week, New South Wales Governor Marie Bashir presented her with the Royal Humane Society of New South Wales Medal for Bravery after Mrs Parsons saved her next-door neighbour's life. Mrs Parsons was helping her disabled neighbour, Robin Pope, prepare for bed in September 2010 when she noticed a smell of burning plastic and realised the spare bedroom, where Miss Pope's wheelchair was stored, was ablaze. Mrs Parsons was able to get Miss Pope, who suffers from multiple sclerosis, into her wheelchair and out of the house. And in sport, throwing athletes from across the country will soon be travelling to Greystanes to compete in international qualifying meets. The trip to Gipps Road Sporting Complex is a welcome change for the New South Wales Throwers Club, which has 40 members training there, including Olympic discus thrower Danny Samuels. No discus, shot put or hammer records achieved at the complex have counted since 1999 due to the state of the venue's discus and hammer cages. But Holroyd councillors last week agreed to spend $25,000 on repairing the cages with new gates and netting.
My squad has been training at Gipps Road for over 20 years. I've been here for over 15 years. The last time that we had the cages upgraded was 15 years ago, and in that time we've had a lot of athletes who have represented Australia at the Commonwealth Games, the Olympics and World Champs, and never before have they been able to qualify for those competitions in a competition held at Greystanes. We've always had to go elsewhere. So it's a great opportunity now to be able to hold those competitions.
Girraween athlete Guy Henley is especially pleased about the funding. Henley is the current Australian record holder in discus and shot put for athletes with a disability, but achieving recognition for his achievement has not always been easy.
I found it really frustrating because I happened to throw the Australian record last season in discus, but because of the state of the cages, it didn't count towards anything. So I managed to get the record 6 months later down at Newcastle.
Westmead athlete Tina Lemmy is another competitor who will benefit from the upgrade.
At the moment I'm training for the World Youth next year that's held in the Ukraine, and if I do a qualifying for either shot put hammer or discus, it will be counted.
A report to Holroyd Council stated if the repairs weren't undertaken, the cages would need to close. A triumphant Irma Alec has been crowned the Australian Women's Taekwondo Champion. The 19-year-old member of the Australian Taekwondo and Fitness Academy at Preston's recently won the black belt title in the 73 kilogram division at Sydney Olympic Park. It caps off a mighty year for Irma, who also won a New South Wales title, the South Australian Taekwondo Championships and Fight Night Taekwondo Championships in her weight division. Razorback driver Max Johnson is all set for this season's Sydney Speedway Track Championship at Granville. Johnson will race his 850 horsepower open wheel sprint car and believes he has what it takes to win after a couple of seasons under his belt. The 18-year-old was named Rookie of the Year in his debut 2 years ago. Johnson's first race in Sydney Speedway Track Championship is on Saturday, and he will race in the Australian Sprint Car Championship in Brisbane in January. And finally, thousands of either gamers turned out to Sydney Olympic Park for the EB Games Expo. Hardcore gamers swamped the precinct, anxious to get their hands on some of the newest releases. The event was as much about the costumes as it was about the games.
This was made in 2009, took me about 4 months and too much money. But I wear this just to have some fun. Aliens are my favourite movies, and I scare kids and I get away with it.
Gamers had the chance to test themselves at FIFA 13, NBA 2013 and the latest installation of Assassin's Creed.
The expo is fantastic. They've gotten a lot more room than what usual conventions have here. It's air conditioned, which is fantastic for people like myself in costume, but also just being able to see all the new games and get your hands on them, you actually get a feel of what you want to buy and what you want to miss.
But just what is it about video games that's so appealing?
What I like about gaming would probably be passes the time or just takes it to another world.
And that's all for this bulletin. For more information on any of these stories, pick up your local Fairfax community newspaper. I'm Christina Pollard. We'll see you next time.